Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Uticang, and it's the show where we chat about business analysis and project management issues and the challenges and triumphs within those two fields. It's inspiring, informative, and very much inquisitive. My guest today is an Agile consultant, an author, and a trainer. He's also helped design the PMI-ACP credential, and he's written 2 best-selling books on how to study and pass the PMI-ACP exam. He teaches courses in Agile leadership, Agile for executives, and preparing for the PMI-ACP exam. He's also a long-term contributor to project management publications. You might see him on projectmanagement.com as an author, and he's been a chair of the group that developed the Agile Practice Guide with the Agile Alliance and co-lead on the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. And he helped create one of the very first Agile approaches, believe it or not, DSDM, back in 1994, which was a forerunner for enterprise agility. So please help me welcome to today's show, joining us all the way from Canmore, Alberta, Canada, Mike Griffiths. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Marcus. Very nice to be here.
Well, I appreciate you coming on as a guest. I want to ask you, how did you get started in project management?
Sure. So I started off with a computer science degree, and then I got into software development, worked on some fairly large projects, like some large military projects that had very formal specifications and, tracing requirements to tests and the whole high process approach to doing things, which is very rigorous and very good and what you need for high consequence environments. But man, it's also very slow and very difficult to change. Even if you know something isn't going to work, the process to communicate that, is a real struggle. So I worked on some kind of death march projects, that we knew they were kind of going the wrong direction and doomed for failure. But in a role of a software developer, our circle of influence was kind of limited. So I was a software developer, but I always wanted to try and fix this, try and improve this process so it could be a little bit more common sense or easier to course correct. And so I just looked out. You mentioned being involved in the creation of DSDM, one of the first Agile approaches, and that was purely by accident. I was working for a company in the UK called Data Sciences that were later acquired by IBM. And it just so happened that a number of people from Data Sciences were involved in that creation of Dynamic Systems Development Method, or DSDM. So I got involved in that group. They were doing great things. They were, responsive to change. They were listening to the customer. They were prototyping and getting early feedback, finding out what we should do. I remember one of the formative moments for me was we'd been getting the users involved in interface design, and that worked really well. They could tell us exactly how they wanted something to look. And we also extended it to get them involved in architectural design too. And that was a disaster. They were suggesting all these approaches that weren't technically viable and wanting to skip, basic fundamental engineering. And so we said, okay, so user input in screen design, that's a good thing. We'll do more of that. User input in architectural design, not a good thing. Let's not do that. And seeing how we incorporated what worked, we rejected what wasn't working, and just adjusted the whole DSDM approach based on experimentation, really got me into, wow, actually, we can be in charge of our kind of own destiny and help shape how we define our ways of working. And so, kind of long answer, but I think I got into project management with this desire to be more efficient in how we run our projects and translate that idea from, a vision of something to delivering the value out of the other end of it. I just get a buzz out of solving problems and building stuff and making that transition from idea to reality, from vision to value. It's been a great career for me.
Now, talking about vision to value, you've got PMillustrated.com. You founded this website, and it's all about visual learning tools, making project management more fun, more engaging. So how do we gain a deeper understanding of project management using visual learning tools? I mean, how does that increase value, or how does that make it easier to be able to deliver value?
Right. Yeah. Now, so we've zoomed right to present day. So I was involved in Agile, got into project management, and throughout my career, I've worked with some super smart people, and quite often I think, okay, I need to dumb this down so I understand it. And I'll either used to kind of secretly draw little diagrams and images of how stuff feeds in. So I remember drawing, all of the inputs of a system, what it does with them, and what it has to update out the back end, and these kind of very simple models. And then I found, as I was a project manager, the best way for me to explain where we are in a project or the issues and things were with some of these models. So I started really presenting in a more visual style. And I realized that project sponsors and executives appreciate that, because we can now all point at the same thing and say, this is where the problem is, that bit's good, this is what we still need to build out and do. And so, many years ago, I made this transition internally to presenting visually. And then I realized that people appreciate that. Agile and Lean has this idea about make work visible, make processes explicit. And it's also that we can have a better conversation about a lot of these things that would otherwise be kind of invisible, right? Knowledge work is often solving something that we can't physically grab hold of or point to. So anytime we can visualize an idea, it helps us gain clarity. So long answer, but PM Illustrated is my latest endeavor, and it's about explaining project management to visual learners. So it's all about creating a big picture first, allowing people to see relationships and the structure and drill down into details, and then explain things graphically. So there's a lot of mind maps and infographics, as well as cartoons and things to make it fun as well. So PM Illustrated is actually a complete learning curriculum for the PMP exam. So now that the PMI's Project Management Professional or PMP exam contains agile and hybrid content as well as traditional, I wanted to, create my own curriculum for it that's for the visual learner. And so it's all there. You can go in and take a look. And yeah, it's been a big shift for me, but one I've really enjoyed, using less words and more pictures. And it seems to, resonate with people, especially younger learners that don't want to be reading 800 pages of, the 6th edition of the PMBOK guide anymore. The 7th edition we created is a lot smaller, but, there's still a lot of dry, boring academic content out there for a lot of this material. And project management is anything but, dry and boring. We're wrangling all these people with different ideas and objectives and kind of agendas or desires. And so it's a dynamic and challenging career. So why is project management like courseware so dull and academic and boring? It didn't seem to gel. So PM Illustrated, yeah, cartoon animals, mind maps and quizzes and games and points and badges to try and, present this information in a different way and hopefully a more engaging way.
Nice. And you mentioned hybrid Agile, you mentioned traditional approaches. And I remember looking on the internet and seeing that you had presented at this HTech Project Management Virtual Conference back in September of 2022. And you had a presentation called Beyond Agile.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, you talked about this hybrid Agile approach. So you mentioned this yes and. So what's this yes and approach to hybrid Agile that you were talking about in that presentation? And how does it relate?
Yeah, absolutely. So beyond Agile, I wrote the 2 ACP prep books that you talked about. And then Beyond Agile is like an advanced level for what's next. You got your ACP, you're a certified Agilist. What's next? How do you extend your career? And so that's what Beyond Agile, the book, was all about. And the yes and the hybrid component of it is Agile is a great starting point. I still think it's the best way for us to undertake knowledge work projects, right? It's got the core there. But when I was researching for the Beyond Agile book, I looked back at all of the projects and the companies I consulted with, and a lot of organizations were doing Agile, but weren't super successful with it. So they were getting projects done, but in relation to the highest performing teams I've ever worked with, they just weren't at the same level. And I've been super lucky to work with some great teams, and one, in fact, in Calgary, that won a PMI Project of the Year award. We went from an in-flight struggling project that was being debated about whether it should be cancelled to delivering and, like I say, winning a PMI Project of the Year award. And the difference between that team and the other teams I'd worked with was that, yeah, they used Agile. A lot of them were ex-ThoughtWorks consultants that used to consult on Agile, but that wasn't all that they used. In fact, Agile was kind of a small part of it. Some days, they would be working directly with the business and learning all about the business. So they had the Agile mindset, but they did a lot of industry-specific stuff. Our success was in big part to a product owner who was very smart and great at bringing out the best of people. They were using a lot of leadership and emotional intelligence. So it went beyond the servant leadership that we talk about in Scrum and other Agile approaches, and really tapping into understanding how to motivate people, how to kind of get them to lean in as opposed to withdraw when we run into problems and conflicts on a project. And you know what? And sometimes, because we were part of a traditional organization, a lot of the things we did, and my role was really to run interference with the existing PMO and give them all the old school reports and things that they needed, right? So it felt like, and this is where the yes and, we definitely did Agile. Everybody was really embracing that mindset. But I did some traditional stuff. The team were experts in the business. We had this great product owner doing a lot of good leadership and emotional intelligence support. And those four domains of Agile, traditional, leadership and emotional intelligence, and industry specific became the focus for this Beyond Agile book. And the yes and is, yes, we do Agile and we do these other things besides, right? So it's the genius of the and that that gets described in the book, From Good to Great, right? He talks about, let's not choose between or. Are we going to do traditional or Agile? Let's embrace them both where it makes sense. And so yes and is all about a smart hybrid approach that, yes, is centered on Agile, but it's not afraid to reach out into other domains to bring in, situationally specific practices. And so, yeah, the presentation I gave that you must have seen the summary for was about this, combining Agile with traditional leadership and emotional intelligence and industry-specific practices to be successful. And that's what I found the very best teams do. Yeah, they're doing Agile, but they don't make a fuss about that part. They solve today's problems no matter which domain they draw from.
Right. Yeah. I've always worked in hybrid environments. I've never really worked in 100% Agile or 100% waterfall. And just talking about leadership and emotional intelligence. So, the PMBOK really talks about how PMs can operate effectively, efficiently, by understanding where responsibility, accountability, authority, all these things that reside with the organization. So looking at leadership and emotional intelligence, how can these two things add value, great value to Agile approaches? Anything else that you want to add to that you haven't done?
Right. Yeah, I think we have to understand that projects are people driven. They're thought up by people, they're executed by people. And the products and services that we build are used by even more people, right? So we can't ignore the people side, but I certainly remember when I became a project manager, first off, I kind of drew comfort in the sciencey stuff. I was gravitated towards plans and estimation and risk management, calculating, critical path, and because it's kind of mathematical, and I had a computer science background, and this stuff I could control, right? It was cool, and I could calculate when we should be done. And it was easier than interacting with the grumpy stakeholder over here, or the team that's bickering over here. And of course, it's the people side that's more important, right? The science and the tools, yeah, it's kind of nice, and we need to know how to estimate and do risk management. But it's because everything is so people-centric, we really need to draw on that leadership and emotional intelligence, right, to be effective. And so now I've created this model that, you need to learn the basics of technical project management, and that's really just getting your driver's license. But then to be effective, we need to learn how to deal with people. And that's what PMI calls power skills. It's what we're calling leadership and emotional intelligence, right? How do we engage with people? How do we resolve conflict? How do we build consensus? Share a vision for where we're trying to get to, and help people when there is obviously competing demands along the way. So, the good news is that our IQ sort of peaks in our early 20s, but our emotional intelligence, we continue to build later into our lives, right? And I think we just get better at dealing with people the more experience we have. And I think project management is a great career because it rewards and recognizes that. As we get a bit older and more mature, and we understand our own emotions and perhaps empathizing a bit better with others, we can continue to progress in our careers by building those leadership and emotional intelligence kind of skills. So it's great. I think it's a good news message, learning that those are so critical.
Well, we're like conductors, we're conducting leadership, conducting planning, conducting an organization, and how it runs and processes. You have a quote that I found on your website, really ignited my mind. Process has weight, but knowledge is weightless. So if we're looking at the planning, we're looking at leadership, we're looking at, trying to have this organization work effectively, how can PMs detect, how can we remove insufficiently performing process so that we can focus more time, more effort on that value delivery?
Yeah, all of the process that we carry with us, like I say, it has weight. And so if we choose to undertake, a document or a process, that will have a time impact or a cost to us. And that's fine if it's adding enough value, right? If it's preventing us from making a mistake, if it's reminding us to think about something, then absolutely, I'm all for it. But quite often we continue to repeat these processes or have these meetings or ceremonies, perhaps after they add sufficient value. So, I like to work with teams, maybe during a retrospective, and say, do we need it? Do we need it anymore? Is it still adding sufficient value? And this was first introduced to me by that high performance team I work with in Calgary, when they said, oh, Mike, we're thinking of dropping the daily coordination meeting, what we used to call the daily stand-up. And it's like, oh, isn't that kind of key? You guys, that's fundamental to all of these different agile approaches. Why would you want to drop that? And they said, well, we're communicating constantly. We're all sat here together. We don't have to set aside 10, 15 minutes to have that. Let's try it for a week. And so we tried it as an experiment, to stop the daily coordination meeting, daily stand-up. And, nothing broke, and things continued. And so I got excited about this and supported the team. And so they dropped iterations or sprints and had a continuous pull from the backlog, and that worked great. Dropped estimation in points and went to like a t-shirt sizing of small, medium, large. And so we dropped so many of the traditional agile ceremonies, including retrospectives. Why would you wait till the end of a iteration to make an improvement or run an experiment? Why not do it immediately? And I don't recommend teams start there. But I really like the mindset of asking, is it still adding enough value, or is there a faster, cheaper, smarter way to keep the original intent, but without the cost, right? And so I think, we can ask, does it add value? Let's try without it. We can always add it back in again. Let's run an experiment. And so, yeah, I think we have a responsibility to our organizations, really, to think about how we spend our time and what we ask of others. And just because we've always done it that way isn't a good reason, right? So that's really not a continuous improvement mindset. That's pretty much stuck where you are. So, yeah,
that's true. That's true. But the thing is, we get this efficient system. We're modifying the processes. We're adding value. But then there's the other side of the coin where you've got interruptions, you've got obstacles in the way, you've got impediments. So what can we as PMs do to protect the team from these low priority items to help not interrupt the flow of the team?
Right. I think that's one of our roles as a project manager, is to kind of shield the team from interruptions, or some of them. I mean, many of them are high value or high consequence, and the team needs to know about them, right? But I think perhaps we could be the first line of filter for our project team. So, people like Csikszentmihalyi talks about flow, and how when you're in the state of flow, you're hyper productive, time seems to vanish, and you're just cranking out value. Every time we interrupt that state of flow, it takes 20 to 30 minutes to get back to where you were. And so if people are pinging our team with random requests or whatever, their productivity is not going to be that high. So better to funnel that through, me as a Scrum Master or project manager, and I can try and shield them. So I think there's a few things we can do. We can perhaps define an interface to our team. So in other words, if you have a request for the team, perfect. We have, we have a backlog here of requests or questions. Anybody is free to go create a ticket or add a card to that pile, and we will look at it, right? So create a request hopper kind of backlog thing. Another super effective way, and how it's been done before, is that quite often, if you want to get something done, you kind of remove the team from the normal corporate structure and create like a skunkworks separate project team, right? That's highly effective because you're now decoupling those people from the normal interruptions and drains on their time. Now, it may not be a repeatable model if your whole organization is splintered and pulled apart into these separate groups. But yeah, we really have to be careful about interruptions to our team. Another example was, I remember before COVID, we were all working face to face. I'd have people on my team who would message me, on chat when I'm sat right across from them. And it's like, seriously, I'm right here. Why would you not just come over and speak to me? And then I realized that, it's easy to ignore chat and respond to it when you're done what you're working on, right? So it pops up, yeah, fine. I'm just going to finish this. Okay, so what did he want? Okay, sure. Yeah, I can send him the so-and-so document. And so I learned that perhaps using chat or a messaging system could in fact be a less intrusive way of interacting with somebody. And so in terms of interrupting flow to the team, yes, face-to-face is obviously, the richest bandwidth and immediate Q&A and stuff, but you are interrupting somebody. So, I guess we should be conscious of how often we do that to our team. And if there is a way that allows them to finish their thought or whatever, that's probably better than, barging over there or calling them on the phone, I guess, is a more obtrusive way, right, of asking a question than perhaps sending them a chat message or something like that. So being aware, I guess, of flow and trying to let that, do its magic.
Well, you certainly expressed that exceptionally well. Now, I mentioned earlier in the introduction that you obviously have written books on PMI-ACP exam, and you teach people how to study for it. So what does the PMI-ACP exam really encompass?
Sure. So the ACP exam is a bit different than, say, the Scrum Masters, Scrum practitioners, and things that are out there, in that it's deliberately approach agnostic. So it combines multiple approaches. So yes, Scrum is in there, but so is, extreme programming and Kanban and Lean. So it's multiple approaches that you might experience in your career as you move around as a professional. But it's also combined with ideas from servant leadership and conflict management. So it's really a broader set of skills that you need to be effective in a like a value delivery or knowledge work type of environment. It isn't just Agile. The practitioner part is broader to say, yeah, Agile's certainly key, but you got to know how to work with people to get things done. The other thing that I think most people don't realize about the ACP is it is an ANSI level exam. So it's ISO, IEC standard. There's a 17204 exam standard. That means it's situational. It's a 3-hour proctored exam. It's not a 45-minute sort of easy multiple choice quiz that over 85% of people will pass, that many of these Agile credentials are, right? There's requirements to even sit the exam. You've got to have a year's experience on Agile projects. You've got to have a certain number of training hours. So I think that's really what's most different about it compared to other credentials. A little bit like the PMP, it has this requirements part. It's not an easy exam. But because of that, hiring managers can have more confidence in the people that have that credential, right? Because it proves that you've got that project experience, the training, and the knowledge and skills to be able to answer that pretty difficult exam.
So I want to study the PMI exam. Where should I start?
Well, I guess if you go to the PMI site, you can learn about the requirements. So you understand what project experience you need to even qualify to sit the exam. And they explain the training that you'll need too. And then the next port of call, I guess, would be the exam content outline. That explains what's in the exam, all of the different domains and topics and stuff. And really that was the starting point for my 2 books on the ACP exam. The exam draws on a dozen books out there, Scrum books and XP books and things. And my book, the PMI-ACP exam prep book, gathers all that information that you need and then puts it in a common voice and lays it out in a logical sequence. So given that you're asking me, I would say go read my book that is geared up for helping you pass the PMI-ACP, because it's limited to the scope of what's in the exam. But before all of that, you do need to have a decent background in Agile projects. Yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
So you mentioned the name of one of the books. What's the name of the other book?
Sure. So I've got the PMI-ACP exam prep book, and there's also a workbook as well. So one is a text-based with exercises that you can work through. The workbook is actually it's fashioned on a backlog of topics you need to know to pass that ACP exam. And there's a little Kanban board, and you can move them across between, ready to start learning about mastered. And so it's a lot more topic focused, and there's a lot more hands-on exercises. So perhaps one is for the reading, traditional exam prep book mode of learning. The workbook is also more for the doer who likes to learn by doing, by solving problems and exercises. And there's actually a third book for the ACP. I got a very small book here, Agile Illustrated. So there's the PM Illustrated for the PMBOK guide. Agile Illustrated is the cartoon version for the ACP. So I've got 6 books in total, and that one is for the ACP.
Wow, splendid. So I'm just going to throw this out there for people who want to take the PMI-ACP exam. Certainly the value that you're going to get is the practical side as well as the theoretical side, and being able to take this back to the workforce to apply it. So I think that That would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's approach agnostic. You need to understand lots of different agile approaches. You also need to understand where lean and Kanban fit, and it demonstrates an understanding of servant leadership and conflict management. So all skills that we are faced with, on our agile projects. So I think it's a great cross section across those disciplines to show that you have those capabilities.
Nice, great. Well, thank you for being on the show, Mike. You've really given a good surface explanation of PMI-ACP. You've gone even deeper too, which is even better. And I want to just thank you once again for explaining that to our audience.
Oh, you're very welcome. No, it's been fun to be on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Now you've got two websites. I just want to list them out: leadinganswers.com and pmillustrated.com. I mentioned pmillustrated.com earlier. So for the audience, if you're interested to see more about Mike or read more about Mike's articles, leadinganswers.com, pmillustrated.com. You're on LinkedIn, Mike, obviously?
Yes, on LinkedIn, but either of those websites also have an ability to contact me there. So happy for people to reach out. I love this stuff, so please get in touch and see what we can do.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming on. It's been splendid, and you're always welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Bye for now.
All right. You're welcome, and have yourself a great day.
You too. Bye.
Okay, bye.
And now a word from our sponsors. The Lewis Institute provides an enterprise project management program that does more than just train PMs. It helps support them from the CEO level on down. These courses help certify project leaders and prepare them to pass the PMP exam.